So first, this is the plan of my talk, the need, the methodology, and the results. So I will begin, of course, by the need. Why did ESGE launch this initiative to set and to write curricula? In fact, when I was president of ESGE 3 years ago, I decided to launch this initiative. And initially, my colleagues were maybe a little surprised, but at least interested by. And in fact, there were two needs, and still two needs. First one is related to the European Society of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy. And now you will understand why. And the second one is a more general need. If you look at the ESGE main activities, you see there you have 3 lines. It's more or less like a river, okay? And first of all, we promote and we do research. Then from all research content, from the findings of the research, we can write guidelines. And then following guidelines, we try to spread the guidelines through education. So there is a stream, a flow in between research, guidelines, and education. Also, we have in between quality parameters. They are also linked to guidelines. And these are two important topics we should cover when you are head of a large society, such as the Society of Digestive Endoscopy in Europe. At the end, you have education. And in Europe, we have different ways to educate people, ESG days, e-learning, webinar, grants. And such events as the event today is typically a model of education. Okay, we educate through a workshop. So this is a river. There is a flow. And maybe you can better analyze all these lines and all these goals and activities which are conducted by a large endoscopy society. In fact, there is stream here, and then from education, you can, in fact, you have to fund some money, some funding to fund research and guidelines. Guidelines are quite expensive to produce. And I want to separate these two parts, these two types of activities, research, guidelines, quality parameters. They are really scientific activities. And they cannot be directly sponsored by industry. They should be conducted totally independently. So they are scientific and not commercial. On the opposite, education, of course, this is, of course, educational activities in principle, but in the same time, they can also be considered as commercial activities. And they help to support guidelines, production, research activities. So this is a cycle. This is a cycle. But two activities in between are missing. If you look carefully at this figure, two activities are missing. And when I was president, I launched these two activities. At least once is still pending. First one is certification. When you conduct education, then sometimes your colleagues are asking for a certificate. They want to get a diploma. And now ESGE is working on certification, and we will soon have ESGE certificate on ESD, for example, or optical diagnosis, etc., etc. So this is an activity which will be covered soon. But the second one is curricula. In between guidelines and education, you should explain how people should be trained. You should have precise, in fact, guidelines concerning education. That's why I launched these activities in Europe in 2017. So this was the need from a European society perspective. Now, more generally speaking, why do we need curricula. In fact, we need two curricula because if you think about training in endoscopy, you have two steps or two levels. When I was a resident and when I was a fellow, I was trained by university. And I learned endoscopy level 1, endoscopy level 2. Endoscopy level 1 is gastroscopy, colonoscopy, dilation. Endoscopy level 2, ESCP, EOS. I was trained at university and following guidelines, which has been produced by the so-called Blue Book. Blue Book is a book produced by European Board of Gastroenterology, which does explain how you should be trained at the level of university. And this is valid for all Europe, with some variations, but nevertheless valid for all Europe. Then, when you enter, when you begin your career, when you quit the university, you need to continue to be trained. And this is called postgraduate training. And this is organized by the European Society of Gastrointestinal Endoscopy or the French Society or the German Society, etc. So this is the role of the scientific societies. And they also organize training for endoscopy level 2, ERCP, EOS. So there is a kind of competition between these two periods of time. But more important, they should train people about new techniques, ESD, optical diagnosis, bariatric, and POEM, for example, okay? Because this is not covered at the university. So it has to be covered by Europe, by the scientific society. And so that's why it does correspond to curriculum. So there are two needs. Now the methodology behind the curricula. I think it's quite important. You need to have a strict methodology. You cannot write such curricula without a working group, without a very strict methodology. Despite the literature is quite limited on this topic, unfortunately. So this is a brief overview of the methodology. We created a working group, and I've been very pleased that Ralph Bishops from Belgium chair this working group. He was a very active chairman, and he fulfilled perfectly the need, and he was excellent. And he was working with an ESGE assistant, and he got funding. Then, by curriculum, we created a task force, and we call ESGE members to be part. We follow exactly the same methodology event for our guidelines, PICO questions to be defined, okay? So we define the questions. We analyze then the literature, and we use the grade system, which is, in fact, does consist to rank the level of evidence and the strength of a statement. And then at the end, we vote the statements following the Delphi process. So this methodology is well accepted and is used for the guidance. So we apply the same methodology. And then this is the agenda. There was a need initially for ESD because a lot of people, they wanted to perform ESD. But ESD is a difficult procedure. So that's why we need a precise curriculum. So ESD, optical diagnosis, thanks to new technology from the different companies. And also we covered small bowel endoscopy because there was also a huge need to explain how to be trained for enteroscopy, capsule endoscopy. Then we moved to larger field recently, therapeutic EOS and ERCP. And the last topic, which will be covered, or the curriculum are pending, colonic EMR for LST, large EMR, such as piecemeal EMR, bariatric endoscopy, and once is still missing, motility disorders treatment of Zenker, treatment of gastroparesis, treatment, of course, achalasia. So this is the agenda. Unfortunately, we succeeded to publish at least 3 first curricula. So these are the task force. I will be brief concerning the task force. So you see that, for example, for ESD, this was a task force. You have a chair, from Portugal, Pimentel Minas, and we have some colleagues from the different places in Europe, okay? And for example, my young colleague, Mathieu Pioche, from my unit. And the same for the other task force. For example, Optical Diagnosis Task Force, Evelyn Decker and James East, David Sanders for the small bowel, and then a very long list of people working for ERCP and EOS, because this is a very large topic and covering both ERCP and EOS. So all these colleagues, and Gavin Johnson at the head of the task force, bariatric endoscopy task force, as you can see, with Boscoschi from Italy. So these are the different task force, and the last one is a colonic EMR, piecemeal. And this one, the work is pending now. So which are the results? So it will explain what we can produce when we want to launch curriculum. And I will take into example the three first curriculum we produce. So first of all, I will speak about ESD because this was the first one, and small bowel endoscopy and optical diagnosis. ESD first. In fact, it's obvious that training is needed for ESD. It is quite obvious. And these are my only slides which refer to literature, in fact, except concerning curricula. So if you look at ESD, and this was a very interesting publication, very frank, very honest, Friede Beer from Austria published untutored series of initial consecutive ESD procedures. It is very honest. And as you can observe, the en-bloc resection rate was quite low. And furthermore, bleeding was quite high, and the rate of perforation was very high, very high. It was frank, but at least it demonstrates that you need to be trained. You cannot begin without any training. And this is a French publication. I participate to this one more or less 10 years ago. In fact, frankly speaking, nobody was well trained. Nobody was. Fortunately, we had mainly stomach and rectum. But you see the rate of perforation was 18%. Of course, large majority of cases, they were treated conservatively endoscopically. Nevertheless, it does demonstrate clearly that you cannot begin without a training, and you cannot begin without a clear curriculum. And training is effective for ESD. And this is just the last publication I refer to. It is a publication which has been conducted to evaluate a self-learning software from Naoisha Yagi. And we conduct this study in vitro on a colon of a bovine colon model. And we asked 39 students from Japan and France to perform more or less 30 ESD per student. And that we observe that the success rate with the software is higher than without the software. Okay. But it was very interesting to observe that ESD is not genetically driven. You are not better in ESD because you are Japanese, and you are not bad because you are French. No. If you are trained, you can become excellent in ESD, even in France. And the French group was not inferior to the Japanese one. And on the opposite, the French group was a little better than the Japanese one. It means when you are trained, even if you are not Japanese, you can perform ESD, and adequately. So this is the first, as an example, the first curricula we published, you see, last year, and about ESD. And just I will be brief, I will explain which are the results. So first, skills and competence to start ESD. Of course, you need to have some practice before performing. So when you write a curriculum, you should explain which is your level of competency before to be trained, and how to maintain the competency, and in between you explain the training program. So before the training program and after. So before, advanced endoscopic diagnostic practice is advised. Training in ESD should be considered only by fully trained endoscopists. Proficiency in EMR and adverse event management is recommended before starting ESD training. And you need to know the knowledge of ESD theory. What is the role of ESD in comparison to EMR, etc. So this is a background you should have. These are the prerequisites. Then the training itself. Of course, you should have done live conferences, just as this one. Meetings are suggested before and during the training. In fact, especially ESD, ESGE discourage the starting of initial ESD training in humans. And practice on animals or ex vivo models is useful to gain the basic ESD skills. And now, to be precise, and this is not so easy to set figures and numbers because the literature is quite poor. Nevertheless, we decided and we stated we recommend at least 20 ESD procedures in these models before human practice in order to get 8 en bloc complete resection in the last 10 training cases. So it has to be precise if you want a curricula to be effective and to well cover the need. Then you need at least 20 ESD procedures observed and 5 procedures as assistants. So this is the second step, in fact. Following training on models, training on animals, you should then observe and assist. And then you should start. And you start in humans, ideally for small, less than 30 millimeter, located in the antrum or in the rectum, for first 20 procedures. This is the initial period. And beginning human practice in the colon is not recommended at this stage. And then ESGE recommends that at least the first 10 procedures in human should be done under the supervision of an ESD proficient endoscopist. That means initially you assist and then you are assisted. So this is very precise. And now some words about knowledge and maintaining competence. In fact, I just underline in red what is very important, of course. I will not cover the whole curriculum, but in red, it is stated that endoscopic performing ESD should be able to correctly estimate the probability of performing a curative resection based on the characteristic of the lesion. And this is very important, of course. Then it does refer to optical diagnosis. You should know optical diagnosis, of course. Of course, you need to know everything about instrumentation, the different knives, the technique, and also the settings of the electrocoagulator. And very important, you should have some knowledge about histopathology, and you should know how to interpret the histopathology findings of a ESD specimen. And you need to know when a resection is curative, when it is non-curative, and the applications. And this is very, very important. And you should be trained or assisted by a pathologist. And in fact, and in red, ESD should be performed only in a setting where early and delayed complication can be managed adequately. And that, what does that mean? It's of course, you have to be very precise when you say this. You need to have an emergency surgical teams, for example, for the organ being treated with ESD. Of course, it's obvious. So you need to have a quite large centers. And you should have an access to an expert gastrointestinal pathology. Initially, when I did first ESD cases 10 years ago, I was obliged to promote ESD towards my pathologist, and my pathologist attended a special course to measure by a micrometer the depth of invasion, etc., etc. And so now we are always analyzing all the cases together. And then continuing the maintenance, ESGE recommends a minimum caseload of 25 ESD procedures per year, and all procedures should be registered in a prospective database to understand to analyze your results and to follow your results. And this is, of course, very important. And finally, very precisely, ESGE stated that embryo resection rate should be above 90%, perforation rate should be below 3%, with a lower than 1% need for surgery because of complication. So you see that if you want to write a curriculum, you should be very precise because it has to be very helpful for your colleagues. Now, optical diagnosis. Optical diagnosis is a more difficult matter in a sense because the literature concerning how to be trained is very, very limited. So many we have experts, we have statements from experts. So I will be brief. I will comment this. Before commencing training, you need to be quite experienced endoscopist, so personal experience of at least 300 upper GI endoscopy or 300 lower GI endoscopy. And you need to, of course, follow the guidance. You need to follow your quality parameters. And of course, you need to know how to use high definition white light combined with virtual and or date-based chromendoscopy. So these are the prerequisites. Then the training. Of course, it is more imprecise than for ESD. You need to attend the validated optical diagnosis training course based on validated classification and self-learning with a minimum number of lesions. The curriculum is more difficult, but the training is easier than ESD. You can be trained on an atlas. You can be trained online. You can receive an evaluation online, for example. And then maintaining competence, you need to meet competence thresholds by assessing a minimum number of lesions prospectively during real-time endoscopy. So this is a personal assessment, a personal evaluation of your competence. And ESGE suggests ongoing in vivo practice by endoscopy to maintain competence in optical diagnosis. So, of course, it was difficult to write this curricula, but I think nevertheless there are very, very clear statements about optical diagnosis, and I'm sure such curriculum will become very helpful when we will launch soon certification in optical diagnosis in France. In France, not in France, in Europe. And the last point, and this is the very last, these are the last talk of my presentation, because I observe that time is running a little, so I will try to be short. So first of all, we were interested also by small bowel endoscopy, because small bowel endoscopy is not learned. You are not trained in small bowel endoscopy when you are at the university. You should receive training later during your postgraduate period. So briefly, first the capsule. Capsule is part of endoscopy. So centers providing training in capsule should perform a minimum of 100 capsule per year. The courses dedicated to capsule should consist of at least 50% hands-on training. So that's 50% hands-on training. That means on a computer, of course. And it has to be completed prior to achieve competence in reporting. So you should attend such course. And then competence has to be assessed by considering a minimum of 30 small bowel capsule endoscopy. So these are the basis. Then enteroscopy. Enteroscopy, in fact, is also a not so easy procedure with different tools, with different devices. So centers offering training in enteroscopy should aim to carry out at least 75 procedures a year. So that means when you are speaking about certification, you need also to accredit the centers. You need to have dedicated centers. Not all centers can train people on enteroscopy, especially if they perform only 10 cases a year. And you should allow a regular discussion of cases at radiology, small bowel, in fact, units. And this is also very important. You should work and be trained also by radiologists to know how it looks like and how is helpful MRI, CT, etc. in the field of small bowel. Trainee should have an experience in level 1 polypectomy prior to commencement of training, because frequently you have to remove polyps when you perform enteroscopy. This is precise. Training should be structured with a minimum of 75 procedures, etc., 35 retrograde, which is difficult, and training should acquire skills to independently manage and advise on small bowel pathology, of course. For example, genetic disease, Peutz-Jeghers, etc., etc. It is highly recommended that international society develop online modules and course on enteroscopy, which are currently lacking across Europe. And that's why now my wish is really to promote certification, because now we have the curricula. We know how people should be trained. So the next step is to organize certification. So this was my last slide. I tried to spare some time. I go a little more faster than I thought. Nevertheless, I hope I have been clear, and I hope that I promoted curriculum. I think each large society should write curricula. And I was very proud and quite happy that this initiative is now very successful here. And we will cover the needs in maybe in the following 2 years. We will have covered all the field of curricula. And this is the role of a scientific society. So just to conclude, I hope that I succeeded to convince you that education is nothing without curriculum. It does suppose curriculum. And that's why I'm very proud. Maybe I hope so, that Don Wilson could have been happy thanks to my talk. And I want again to thank Philippe Chou for giving me the opportunity to give his talk. And he's a very active in the field of endoscopy, of course, in many fields, but of course, especially in education. And thanks again, Joseph. Thanks again, Philippe. And have a nice course.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Ponchon.